pretty good and also very intense documentary. Yeah, I think you know some of the things that were discussed there, some of the things that they talked about are obviously intense, obviously heavy, um, but there's a reason that they're heavy, right? The reason is because maybe you saw some things there that struck a chord with you, or if you feel that zing of, whoa, that's intense. And the reality is that when our kids are online, there's such a high chance of them experiencing something like that every time they go online without somebody to help them to navigate that world in a healthy way, right? And so before we just move on and just dive into giving you guys resources, I wanted to just get, since a lot of us know each other here, some of your reactions. So here's a question for you. Joe's got a microphone in the back here, and I also just wanted to welcome. We're actually going to we're recording this, so welcome to our recorded folks. We are just finished watching the Childhood 2.0 documentary. You guys can look it up on YouTube for free. Watch the whole thing, and then join us at this stage. But we have a question for you. So this is the question: what were some of the emotions that you felt watching that documentary? If you had to describe your reaction in one or two words, what would it be? So Joe's got a microphone here. So Joe, you can even start if you want to say two words that maybe.
I don't know. It's on. Well, this is probably like my third or fourth time watching this documentary, and I just feel like every time I watch it, there's always something new that I pick up on or something new that I kind of cue in on. And it could be just because my kids are 6 months older now than what they were when I watched it the last time, and I just have, a different perspective, really. But the statistics, every time those come up, it kind of hits you. Some of those are 75-80% of kids are, getting the cyberbullying. The age of the kids that are, committing suicide is just astounding. And to see it from like a doctor's perspective, of seeing that in the hospital kind of blows your mind. Just crazy.
It does. Yeah, who else? We'll bring the mic to you so that the people who are on the recording can hear you.
Yeah, just really, like you said, it's kind of heavy. But I'd say, like, in a couple words, like frustrating and almost like angry, but then at the same time, how much our children actually want to connect with us, and we have to love them. Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah, we play such a vital role. That's so great. Yeah, Natasha.
Yeah, I think heartache
Yeah.
is what I was feeling, like really intense, just watching the kids, like hearing them, thinking about that, the young people in this whole nation, in this society. So, yeah, I feel frustrated. I don't know, it seems really huge. Really overwhelming.
Yeah, overwhelming. Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah, and I think the one person who said the best filter you can give them is between your ears or something like that.
Yeah.
That's like the one thing has a little bit of encouragement. Like maybe we can help them navigate.
Yeah, that's good. That's so true. Yeah, and I think that's a great segue. I think that is so important for us to understand. Our goal as parents is to allow our kids to have exposure to technology when they're ready for it, right? Our goal isn't just to say, oh man, the internet is evil and we'll just lock it down and you'll never see anything. You never use the internet until you're 18, No, we need to actually, because when, like they said in the documentary, they're going to fly the nest one day, right? They're going to grow beyond your home, and we actually, as parents, it's our job to help them. That's why we always use that verbiage when we describe this event. It's not to say to protect your kids only from things online, but it's also to help them navigate life online. And so I think when you watch a documentary like that, and it's heavy, it's intense, but there's only one conclusion that we come away with, and it's this, that we can't afford to be absent from this area of our kids' lives. That if we're aloof and we're distant, then they're swimming in this ocean of stuff all alone, with no life preserver, no one to teach them how to swim. And so as parents, I love that analogy that Chris McKenna. He's actually a believer, by the way. The guy with the spiky hair and the glasses who says so many great things. He's a believer, and he started this organization called Protect Young Eyes that interacts with all of these major secular organizations on this topic. And I love what he said. He said, giving your kids a device that's unmonitored totally, and just saying, here you go. It's like, if I had a coffee table in my house and I had 4 magazines on it, and one of them was pornographic, and I just hoped that my kid wouldn't get curious or wouldn't ever look at that 4th magazine. I mean, it's so similar to that. And I even can remember experiences from my life being younger and not having had those conversations with my parents, and just curiosity pulling me into that world unexpectedly. And I'm sure many people have that same story. And so as parents, there's a word that we use often that is this. It's, as parents, we have to be intentional. And I think this means 3 things here. That number 1, we have to have frequent conversations with our kids about technology. And I love what they said at the end there, where there's like a no instant punishment policy, where it's like, hey, you can come and talk to me. If you encounter something that's weird or scary or gross online, you don't need to feel any shame. Just come and talk to me about it so we can have a conversation. Number 2, we have to have access. We have to have total access to their devices, to their messages, and to their apps. And I know that's an intense word, total access, especially if you already have a teenager who's got a lot of things that are private on their phone. Probably part of the reason why they're private is because there's things on there that they wouldn't want you to see. And number 3, we have to be intentional about actively monitoring and protecting their devices. And so I want to quickly outline some resources here, and I'm going to go over this even more quickly than I had prepared for the sake of your time, because I want to get to our panelists. But we have tons of resources that we've put in your hands there that you can research. You can use them to get educated about these different things. But there's really 2 things that we can do as parents. There's 2 different ways that you can be involved in your kids' lives online. Apart from relating to them as people, there's 2 things. Number 1 is that you can monitor what goes on your kids' devices. So whatever's coming across this screen, the first thing you can do is you can be monitoring it. You can make yourself aware of what's coming through here into your kid's mind. Number 2, you can filter and restrict the things that come across your kid's screen. So you can have technology, you can leverage it in a way that you can be aware of whatever's going on here, but then you can also leverage it in a way where you're filtering, you're blocking inappropriate content, restricting what apps they can use, preventing them from downloading certain apps that they're not ready for, requiring approval for downloads or for new friends or for making their account public or any of those different things. And there's 4 main layers where this occurs. Okay, so I want you to picture this with me. Here's my phone, right? So my phone, inside of my phone is my apps. So parental controls can happen on apps. That's the most granular way. Then larger than that, you can put restrictions on my phone that guard all of my apps or all of my internet engagement. And then beyond that, my phone, to get to the internet, has to link up to a router somewhere, right? And a home network, or here at the church, the church network. So you can put restrictions actually and monitoring devices on your home network. And then actually, you may not know this, but you can also, most wireless network providers. So once I leave the church, right, I get in my car and I'm driving, I won't be on the church internet anymore. So I'll be on a wireless network that bounces off of a tower. Your wireless provider actually probably provides some form of parental restrictions or controls that you can use. So we're going to go through these quickly here. So let's talk about layer 1, in-app controls. Now, it would take us hours upon hours to go through every app that's out there and what is dangerous on that app, what sort of controls there are. So we want to direct you guys. So this is Chris McKenna's organization. It's called Protect Young Eyes. This is your one-stop shop. So again, if we just told you, if you walked in and we said, hey, you're going to want to check out this website, Protect Young Eyes. Yep, see you later. You'd be pretty good off, honestly. There's so much information on this site. It's like an encyclopedia for apps, for devices. So they have, here, let me show you here. So this is their app. So parental controls, look, this is all the apps. They have articles about every app you can think of, about what restrictions are available, about what's on that app. Then they also have, so there's Instagram. You see a ton of things on here you probably don't even know, or I don't even know them. Snapchat's on there, TikTok is on there. But then if you look here, they also have a whole section on devices as well. And so Apple TVs, Oculus, PlayStation, Wii, any of those different things, they have instructions and articles about what you can actually do to place restrictions on those devices, what's available, and what might be dangerous on them as well. And so I really highly recommend you using them. We actually use them to produce a lot of the content that we've got for you guys today. So they're fantastic. You guys have heard of this new app, Be Real, that's becoming famous with youth? Anyone? No? Okay, well, you'll hear about it soon. Kid at the Solenco Fair came up to me and said, "Yo, will you take our Be Real?" And I was like, I'm finally in. They like me. But Be Real, and I actually went on Protect Young Eyes before this night in case somebody asked me about Be Real to look at their article about Be Real so that I would know what it's all about. So here's layer 2. On-device controls. Now, this is kind of the bread and butter of where you're going to get a lot of monitoring and filtering is actually on the device. And so there's really 3 things we're going to talk about here. The first one, that little icon, is for Apple Screen Time. The second one is for Bark, which is kind of the big kahuna. They're the best at all of this combined. And then the third, that's the symbol for Google, Google Family Link. So everybody can use Bark. Bark is amazing. But if you're an Apple user, you probably want to use Bark in conjunction with Screen Time. And at least you need to be using Screen Time for sure. Now, if you're a Google user, you don't have Screen Time built into your settings, you're going to want to download an app called Google Family Link, which is going to allow you to put restrictions on your kids' devices. On device, so let's talk about Bark for a second. So what Bark does, let me pull that up. Bark is we think it's the best app for both. The reason why is because it both monitors and restricts. Does that make sense? So you can see what's going on in your kid's device, and you can also restrict it through Bark. Now, otherwise, it's very difficult. There's a couple other apps that allow you to monitor and restrict. You may have heard of Covenant Eyes. A lot of people use that for accountability with different content online. Or maybe you've heard of, what was the other one that I was thinking of? Doesn't matter. But yeah, Covenant Eyes or Accountable to You is another one that some people use. But Bark is amazing for kids. And what Bark does is in real time, watches your kid's device, and it can you can adjust the settings of how sensitive it is and how much it's going to notify you about. But it watches texts, messaging, web browsing, and 30-plus apps for inappropriate content. And what it does that's really cool is it'll send you a screenshot of what it's flagging. So it'll flag, this looks like a nude picture. We're going to flag this, and it's going to go, and you're going to see right away, oh, that's what's going on my kid's phone. But the cool thing is, too, it is smart. So it understands lingo, it understands, and they're constantly, a lot of the folks that interviewed in the documentary work for Bark. The people who did that kind of sting operation, those were all Bark folks, and they're really good at understanding what's going on in culture and stuff. And so Bark is actually able to notice things that you might not even know about as a parent yet. But it monitors for things like sexual or inappropriate content, inappropriate photos and messages, online bullying, and even self-harm and suicide. So it'll flag certain words, certain things, and you'll get hey, someone just said to your kid, hey, have you ever thought about hurting yourself? Or, and you'll get that screenshotted and sent right to you from Bark. Now, here's the thing about Bark. It works great, but it struggles a little bit to work with Apple devices. Apple's kind of always got its own universe going on, right? And so Apple devices, the way Bark works, instead of sending you updates in real time like it would on an Android device, what Bark is going to do is it's going to, as soon as I walk in the house with my iPhone, it's going to ping up to my wireless network, and it's going to upload a backup of whatever I did that day, my messages, my photos, everything. And what Bark does is it catches that backup and reads it. So the downside is if you're in a situation where your kid's really struggling and they're deleting stuff before they get home, you might not see it if you have an Apple device. But it's a downside that for some people it's a big deal. For some people it's really not. The other thing is on an Apple device, Bark isn't able to monitor Instagram, Snapchat, or Discord. And there's one more. There's quite a few that Apple kind of protects those apps, but that's true with any software that you're going to try to use to monitor an Apple device. You're not going to get that view into apps like Instagram and Snapchat, unfortunately, because Apple protects those, and so do the companies that own them. So yeah, $14 a month is the cost of Bark, but Joe will tell you he's a big believer in it, and he uses it. He uses it with his many children, and it's incredibly effective. So yeah, you can ask Joe. He's kind of like the Bark guru if you want to talk to him more about that. So if you are an Apple user, you are going to want to use Apple Screen Time, which comes free. It's built completely into your child's device. And so the thing about Screen Time, so again, it's not like Bark or Covenant Eyes or anything like that where you're going to get to monitor. What Screen Time does is it restricts. So Screen Time, it can set limits on apps and downtimes for the device. It can set limits on communication based on contacts, like, hey, I only want you to talk to these few people, or I don't want you to talk to anybody except me, or those sorts of things. It can allow or restrict certain apps, so you can actually turn off app downloading on an Apple device so that your kid only gets the apps that you download on there, and they have to request if they want to download something else. And it can also restrict any kind of internet browsing. So you can turn off all explicit content on any internet browser through there. And you can also restrict additional websites if needed by domain name. And that's something that's useful for anybody to have, I think, actually. Like, even for adults, to just restrict adult content on your phone so you don't end up running across something you might not want to run across online. So that's inside of your child's device, but Apple also allows what's called family sharing, and maybe you've discovered this, where you can set up your child's Apple ID to be a child ID under your parent ID, and that allows you to have certain control over their screen time from a distance from your phone. Does that make sense? So you'll see parents, I see parents all the time getting requests from their kids that the little notification pops up, hold on, I need to approve some screen time here. They want to use 20 more minutes of YouTube, so I'm going to approve that. And so you can actually do that remotely from your device to their device if you set up family sharing through the settings app. Now, we have tutorials on how to do all that, YouTube links in your packet that you can find for great YouTube channels that provide fantastic tutorials on these things, how to set them up with pictures and everything you might need. So Google Family Link is essentially the same thing, but it's the Android version. So Google Family Link, it does all the same things that Screen Time does, sets limits, you can set restrictions and those sorts of things, but it's just the Android version. Now, if you have an iPhone and your kid has an Android, right, which Androids are much easier to monitor with Bark, like I mentioned before, or other apps than Apple devices are, If your kid has an Android, you can download Google Family Link onto your iPhone, because it's an app, and onto their Android, and it will work great. But if your kid has an iPhone and you have an Android, that iPhone isn't going to work well with Google. You want to use Screen Time, if that makes sense, to work with your kids who have iPhones. And I know it's something like 70 or 80% of kids have iPhones these days. So that's like worldwide. So I won't go deeply into this. So at home, you can set up these same restrictions on your wireless router. So your router is like the gateway. So this is layers 3 and 4. So at home and cellular networks, you can set up these restrictions on your router at home. And your router, if you think about it, like that's the gateway that the internet comes into your home through, right? So if you want to restrict all the devices in your home, simultaneously, your router actually, even if you don't have a special router, sometimes it will have restrictions built into it for timing. Like Joe, he's mentioned that in the past, he's like just shut off all the internet at 9 o'clock in his home for these certain devices, But what you can actually also purchase routers. So the one that Protect Young Eyes recommends is called the Griffin router. You may have heard of it. There's another one called Circle. Bark also makes one that's called Bark Home, but they suggest that Griffin is probably the best one. It's the most robust, and it has really powerful software where you can restrict not only time on the internet, but also the content, what sort of domain names are able to come through the internet based on whether they're clean or not, and that's a powerful tool. So again, check your resource page for more on this. That's only going to cover you inside the home, so you're going to want to have all of these layers kind of layered together, not just have one or another. And then again, like I said, you can have wireless restrictions as well that might be available. If you go into your online account with your wireless provider, you should be able to find that. So yeah, I went through that rather. Yes. Yeah. Mm. That's wise. Yeah. So that's worth noting. So that's why you want to have these layers in working in unison because let's say you just buy a Griffin router but you don't put any restrictions on your kid's device. They might be able to hook up to your neighbor's wireless network because the password is like 1234 or something like that, and then roll around on their internet. So that's the kind of thing you want to be aware of. And so yeah, I know that's a lot of information to kind of consume quickly, but so Mike is here, Joe is here, Wendell is here. Would you guys want to come on up and take the stage for our panel? So all of us will be available after this. If you have any questions that we'd love to answer them. And actually, Mike and Joe both have volunteered, and also John Petro, who's in the booth back there. Can we give it up for John Petro? He's always faithfully serving in the booth. Amazing. Set up all our cameras for tonight. John is also available to be kind of like tech advisors for our parents in our church. So if you'd like to have a follow-up meeting with them and say, hey, help me with this. This is so overwhelming to me. They'd be glad to meet with you and kind of give you what they have. So, all right. So before we wrap up tonight, we have talked about what's out there, why you need to be involved. We've talked about the technology piece, how you can engage. Now we should talk a little bit about the parenting piece. So what does it look like to parent your kids in relationship to these issues? And so we have our panelists here. You guys can introduce yourselves as you answer our first question. So I'm going to start with this question for our this year we actually have a dads panel, which I think is kind of cool. So dads, I think, are always in for a little protecting their kids. So yeah. So here's our first question for our panelists, and like I said, you can say your name when you answer. But so here's the question: how does your family handle technology in your home? And what boundaries have you used in your home for giving your kids access to devices, screen time rules, and access to social media? If you want to talk about ages, you can talk about that as well. It's a pretty wide open question, so go for it.
All right, my name is Wendell Slayball. We have 4 children. 2 are married and out of the house, and now we have 2 teenage girls in the house and an exchange student teenage girl in the house. Girls are a little different than boys. So technology has been a major challenge in our home. It's probably one of the biggest tension points over the years. But we are probably one of the more restrictive families. Our kids go to a Christian school, but we're probably one of the more conservative ones in that school even. A lot of the things, it was encouraging to hear what they were mentioning. We don't allow them to have their devices in their rooms. We actually don't give our kids smartphones until they're actually 16. We figured they do have iPads and stuff in our home that we allow them to use, but they can only use them in our living room, dining area, and kitchen area because we are present there. Last year I finally did it, was we used the Apple Screen Time. It honestly has removed a ton of drama. And we help set that time limit with our kids, and they can't get on their phones. They get about 15 minutes before they leave for school, and then it closes down like 15 minutes to half an hour before they go to bed. And they have an hour and a half a day, and that's what works for us. The kids, there's no drama. They know when it's up, and so that's really helped because it's been a real challenge with, well, they could say, well, I'm reading my Bible, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. It's like, well, really? You're reading your Bible? Why'd you switch so fast when I came in the room? So that's been very helpful, and I don't want to monopolize the time. I could talk a long time about this, but.
Hello, my name is Mike Cocker. We have 3 children. I have twin daughters who are turning 16 this December. That seems really weird to say. And I have a son, Grady, who turned 13, right? Yeah, 13, that's right. Yeah, he's 13. Very similar to Wendell, very restrictive on technology. And I love technology. That's the industry I work in. I love automation, I love gadgets, I love all of it. And so we have a lot of it in our house, and with that, we quickly learned that we had to set up the controls. So like Wendell, we use all the Apple products. Screen time, while we were sitting here tonight, we got to, requests from the kids saying, hey, I want more screen time minutes for YouTube. And with that, we also don't allow devices in the kids' rooms. Sarah always talks about her childhood, and they caught it in the video as well. When we had to talk on the phone, it was with the cord wrapped around the corner of the house, and everybody heard your conversation. And so with that, when the kids go in the room, there is that privacy, and they're not old enough to handle that. So their rooms are upstairs, so nothing leaves the first floor. And it's been that way. That was the baseline from the beginning, and it's been working.
And my name's Joe Rainier. I have 7 kids, 6 daughters, and a son. The ages are 7 to 16. So I'm probably a little less restrictive than these 2 gentlemen. As Jake had mentioned, I have the Bark app on all of our devices. Our kids don't get their devices till they're 13, and they also have to be responsible in our eyes, me and my wife's eyes, to be able to let that happen. We do kind of a graded approach, so the older child gets a little bit more time than the next child, and then it gets more restrictive as it goes down. To the little ones, they only get an hour a day on their devices. Usually that's for school, that type of thing. We have found that it's more difficult with school because they give them their iPads, so they bring those home, and you really have to keep an eye on them because they'll say, oh, I need to charge it, and there's not enough charging ports. With 7 kids, we don't have a ton of charging ports, so it ends up in the hallway or it ends up in the bathroom somewhere, and before you know it, you're like, well, I can't put the restrictions on the iPads for the screen time restrictions, so we're kind of working through that right now. But yeah, overall, the Bark app does monitor our devices. I do have restrictions on our Wi-Fi, on our cellular devices. We also have, I'm trying to think anything else that we have on there. Oh, the screen time. So we have all of those set up on their devices, and I will definitely say with the video that played, it can be overwhelming at times to keep up with it, continually keep up with it, and I guess it is a little bit of a problem that I'm an Android user and everyone else in my family is an Apple user, so I have to sometimes use my wife's phone, but we also use the feature that Mike was talking about where if they want to download apps, then they have to request that. And I think Jake was talking earlier about the BeReal app, and I did want to mention that, with the Protect Young Eyes, it's an awesome resource. It was a couple weeks ago, one of the kids asked if they could download this app before requesting it, and they kind of explained it a little bit to us, and my wife said, well, what do you think? And I was like, well, I don't know anything about it, I've never heard of it, I don't know what it is, and I was telling Jake, I went on to the Protect Young Eyes, and I was able to screenshot the synopsis of what it is, what it's similar to, if there is any monitoring on it, and me and my wife discussed that, and we told the kids it's okay to have on kind of a conditional basis, and we'll kind of see how it goes from there, just based off of what I can tell from the app. So we are pretty restrictive on, no Snapchat, no Instagram, no Facebook, in that sense. And, like anything else, the peer pressure gets to them. They ask us, well, everybody else has it, but we don't. And that's a tough thing as a parent to work through. But at the end of the day, I think it's the best decision. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's helpful to see that there are a variety of ways to engage this issue. Wendell and Yvonne tend to be more minimalist in their approach. you know, Mike has very specific rules that work for his family and how they handle things. And then Joe has more, he leverages technology to allow his kids to be a little bit more free, but also to be very aware of what's going on. And so there's a lot of different ways to do this. So quickly, we want to answer one more question with you guys. And that is, what advice would you give to parents here about how to discuss these issues with their kids? Specifically, I heard all of you mention that you engage your kids at some level in the discussion. Why do you think it's important to engage your kids in that conversation and not just have a kind of, you know, total control, totalitarian, like this is how it's going to be way of handling it? And in general, that's one thing I'd like you to speak to, but in general, what advice would you give about, man, let's say there's someone here, they've never talked to their kids about this before. How would you encourage them to start?
First of all, I would say that it can also create marital challenges. So it's important that you and your spouse are on the same page in relation to it, because Yvonne and I have slightly different views on it, but to come to an agreement. And I think as you consider parenting, you're trying to parent the heart and not the actions. And there's reasons for the actions. And so if you just deal with the actions and if it becomes behavior modification, when they leave our house, they're going to boom. Tendency will be to go to that. So that's the real challenge, is like trying to get to the heart. And so in inviting them into the conversation and explaining, we might not come to an agreement exactly, but you at least hear them and give them a voice in that. And it is, if you haven't done anything, it's going to be like cold turkey, like shock. But at the end of the day, we're their parents and we're there to protect and provide for them. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit from our perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. One thing that we did once we got the Bark app, once I kind of discovered it, started trying it out, was kind of realizing we needed to establish some rules around it, and we did include the older kids, and kind of with the expectation of, you're the guinea pig here, and you know, you have 6 other siblings that are going to follow in your footsteps. So what do you think is going to be good for them in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the road? And I think just including her into the conversations helped us develop good rules, and rules that she'd be willing to follow as well. So it's a good thing to do.
I was trying to think back. I don't think we actually involved the kids in the initial discussion. I was thinking, you know, when boundaries are, you know, to protect our children. When our children are born, you know, parents go and they put outlet covers over all the electrical outlets. You know, anytime they get close to a stove, we go and grab them and say it's hot. And we have to have these types of boundaries as well. So I think as parents, you know, we have to understand what the goal is. But we also need to engage them to kind of understand what they want to use technology for. When I was 16 years old, I went to my parents and I said, I want a computer. My dad, who's an old school diesel mechanic, is like, that's a waste of time. You know, we're not getting you this. And now that's what my career is, so it's kind of funny. But just understanding the child's point of view on this, because most of our kids who are using technology are a bit older, and just saying, hey, what do you want this for? Why do you want to have it for 4 hours a day or an hour and a half a day? What do you plan to do on it? And just getting their input and being a part of that conversation. But at the end of the day, you know, it was talking about peer pressure of children and that type of thing. I think there's also peer pressure of parents as well, because I know in our friend circles, when they find out that we're the parents that lock everything down and our kids' friends have all the social media, Sarah and I are very good at not giving in, and you guys will face that as well, you know, parenting peer pressure. So be the uncool parents. Say no to social media. You know, it's all right. Our kids are not the coolest kids because they don't have social media, but we're okay with it. And when you see the statistics that have been presented, like, I'm not going to change my mind on it. Like, nothing's going to change our mind on it. So it's okay to not be cool.
Yeah, thank you guys. I think your kids are cool, Mike. No. Hey, well, can we give a round of applause for our panelists here? We appreciate you guys' input here. Well, yeah, I just want to close with just a couple of things here. First off, don't feel overwhelmed. You've got plenty of time to figure this out. You don't need to figure it out overnight, and there's plenty of help available. We're here to help. Number two, invite the Holy Spirit into that process. You know, invite the Lord into guiding you in what is going on with your kids. I've talked to parents. We had a couple moms in the last panel, and they shared about times where they just felt the Lord kind of nudge them to go a little deeper into something, and they found something they needed to find. So invite the Holy Spirit there. And the last thing is that, you know, you might have felt a lot of emotions watching that documentary. You have an opportunity to be advocates for this issue with the parents that you know. I really feel passionately that as believers, we're not just supposed to be transformed ourselves, but to be agents of transformation in our world. And so if we're not going to discuss this issue, who is going to discuss it? If we're not going to be willing to expose this, then who is going to? And so I encourage you to share some of this information with parents you know who need it a lot, maybe a lot more than you, for the sake of their kids. So thank you guys so much for being here. And yeah, we'll be here to answer questions. We'll all hang in the back. So feel free. Actually, if our advisors would come up to the front, if you guys want to come approach us and talk to us just for a few minutes, we'll be here until about 9:15. So feel free to come talk to us. Thank you guys so much for being here. We hope you have a great night.